Good morning and welcome to the Lightcast live analysis of the employment situation, also known as the monthly jobs report, a U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics report released every month to give us some indication into the health of our economy. On this December 2nd, 2022, I'm your host, Christopher Laney, and I am joined by two of our labor economists. We have today Elizabeth Crowfoot and Rusha Van Kudre. Elizabeth, Rusha, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, good to see you. So let's get started here. Before this came out, we were kind of looking at this Goldilocks report, not too hot to spur inflation, not too cold to lead into a recession. So, Rusha, I want to start with you. Are we too hot? Are we too cold? What's this report saying?
We are too hot. I think everyone was really hoping that things were going to start showing a little bit of slowdown like we had seen in the past month, right? With, last month, at least unemployment ticked up very slightly. I think everyone was really kind of hoping we were moving towards that direction. And we're not seeing that here at all. The economy added 263,000 new jobs, which is more than everyone was expecting. If you look at the fields where everyone's talking about the layoffs, like tech, for example, which in our data shows up usually as information or professional and business services, they're both still adding quite a few jobs. So they're just not showing up in this data at all. Unemployment has stayed exactly the same. So I think this report is just way too hot for what the Fed was looking for. The labor market is much stronger and more resilient and seems to have not been impacted at all from the last month.
So, Elizabeth, the Fed is dramatically trying to kind of control inflation, raising interest rates. We saw this week inflation started to decrease just a little bit. But looking at this report, as Rusha was saying, do you see that the labor market is really dramatically being affected by the actions of the Fed right now?
Definitely not. We're not seeing evidence that the labor market is cooling. Quite the opposite now. We're seeing accelerating job gains. It's really concerning, actually. And not only that, it's the wage gains, right? In this report also accelerated above 5%. So last month or in the previous, October, we had seen them decline to 4.7%. And that was giving us some indication that maybe, those decline in wages would trickle in or help pull down prices as well. But we're seeing the opposite effect this time. Wages are increasing. And also with the labor force declining, right? People that are not in the labor force is also increasing. Over the last 2 months, we've lost about 500,000 potential workers that are now not in the labor force. So we're not going to be able to rely on increases in labor force participation to help pull down wage pressures and price pressures as well. So this is, and on all accounts, going on the wrong direction for the Fed, for sure.
So I guess when you talk about labor force participation and you say it's going down, that it seems confusing to me because we're like in the holiday season. And so you would think like people are hiring up, specifically retail is hiring up right now to kind of fill the need of, the season. What are you seeing related to retail specifically in this report?
So specifically, retail actually went down by about 30,000, which I think is a little bit crazy considering, as you're saying, we are heading into the holiday season. So that went down. And then surprisingly, transportation and warehousing also went down 15,000. So it's almost like we're seeing the drops in the places where we don't want to see them and then seeing gains in the places where we weren't expecting to, like the professional services and information and financial activities.
So can we stay on that for just a second? Rusha or Elizabeth, feel free to respond to this. Every time, I open up like the headlines, it's this major tech company that's hiring, laying off more people. We've talked about this over the last couple of months, and we've said this is not a clear indication of what's happening in the industry. In this report, once again, are we seeing that the data is telling us it doesn't match like the narrative that the media has given us that there's all these layoffs coming? So Elizabeth, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case. We're seeing, as Rusha mentioned, that we're seeing job gains in these sectors that traditionally house these workers that we're seeing layoffs, in the headlines from major corporations. And we're just not seeing that in the data, either in the JOLTS, as we talked about earlier this week, or now in, overall job gains. So it's definitely just hype right now in the media. And, it's good news because we don't want people to be losing their jobs, especially during the holidays. And we're seeing that with consumer spending. Consumer spending has been up. people feel good about their jobs. They feel good about their income. And also maybe, they have been spending down some of their savings, but there's still a little bit of a buffer. Maybe that's also why we're not seeing some of that labor force participation tick up. So people are still feeling relatively good.
Yeah. So Rusha, kind of to that same point, as we start to look at the next couple of months, I know we don't have a crystal ball right now. If the Fed did, they would be much happier. But if you had a crystal ball right now, what do you think we're going to see over the next couple of months, especially as we come out of the holiday season? And we're already seeing some of these industries like retail already dropping.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very confusing time, certainly. Just to spend a little bit more time, I think, on the tech layoffs, as Elizabeth was saying, we didn't see it in the JOLTS report earlier this week. And I think to some extent we weren't really expecting to, given that one is lagged. So I think everyone was really waiting for this report to be able to say, okay, well, now we have the more recent data, things are starting to show up, and they really still aren't. And I think it's just notable that, as people have talked about, with particular emphasis on big tech, they're sort of in a different position than the rest of the economy, where many of them overhired. So whereas I think many firms in the economy were not able to get all the workers they needed during the pandemic times, big tech did the opposite. And they were able to compete, they were able to overhire, and a lot of them were also betting on future growth and on pandemic spending patterns that have really changed. So I think the fact that, we're seeing that in the headlines, but not in the economy overall, actually makes perfect sense. As we look ahead to the next couple months, I don't know. I mean, as Elizabeth was saying, it's great for people to keep their jobs 100%, but it's not clear that this inflation is good for anyone. And while it is, it's starting to come down a little bit, we've seen that. I think the fact that this unemployment rate is steady, and we know that the Fed has said that they're planning on continuing raising interest rates until they see that unemployment rate comes up, makes me think that, we're going to keep seeing those rates rise for the next few months. And then that is going to, sort of have an impact on the rest of the economy. So I think we'll have to wait and see what happens. After last month's report, I think, I was a little bit more optimistic in terms of, okay, things are slowing down. We're having that really soft landing that everyone was looking for. But now it seems to have just taken off again. So I'm not sure where we are.
Yeah, Rusha, you mentioned, last month when we were talking about this, unemployment had ticked up just a little bit, and you had mentioned that was a positive thing. Here we are at 3.7%, didn't move at all. Is that good or is that bad?
I would say that is not good for what we're looking for. I mean, I never want to say more on unemployment is good. I hesitate to say that, right? Because obviously,
you don't want anybody losing jobs during the holiday season. Yeah,
exactly right. I'm not saying I want people to be unemployed. However, I think what we're looking for in terms of slowing things down and getting inflation down is that unemployment rate to tick up. So yeah, in that sense, this is bad news.
I think one thing that we've talked about this all year long. The one thing that we were hoping, and every month we're looking for, is labor force participation to tick up. Like, all of us want more people just to be working, but there's still so many people on the sidelines. And that seems to be the challenge. Elizabeth, I know you were just talking about it a little bit further. Do you have any idea, any thoughts on what it would take to try to re-engage these people? Why are they not working right now? And why does it keep dropping?
No, that's a really good question. And I alluded to that a little bit before. People are still feeling good about their jobs. There's a lot of opportunity out there. We're at still almost historic levels of job openings. And there are still challenges, especially with daycare centers still have not come up to the levels of employment they were pre-pandemic. So that is still an issue. I know we haven't talked about it in a while, or, people seem to forget, but that is still, a major issue. Also sickness. People having COVID or the flu or RSV, especially among young children. And, I've lived this myself with my 2 young children. We can't seem to keep healthy. So, it's very difficult. And just to kind of look into my own crystal ball as well, because I had some thoughts, from what Rusha was saying and what you were asking, like, what are we expecting? Well, I feel like we've sort of been in like this preseason game when it comes to the impact of Fed policy. We really haven't seen much action. And we're going to be going into the regular season. Over the next, 3 to 6 months, we're going to see that the pace of the game is going to speed up. The blows are going to get harder potentially. So we are seeing a lot of resilience in the labor market today, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to see, or we're not going to see those effects of labor market or of Fed policy later in, Q2 of next year, for example. So just something to keep in mind.
That's a great analogy. We always appreciate the sports analogy. So, Rusha, as we close up here, give me your final takeaways on this report, and then we'll head back over to Elizabeth.
Sure. I think final takeaways are, as we said at the beginning, the labor market is too hot. We're adding more jobs than we thought we would. We're adding them in the places where we didn't think we would be, and we're losing them in the places where we'd like to see them there. So that, plus the fact that unemployment is, staying at the same rate, and labor force participation is down, means that this is possibly going to be a tough season for the Fed.
Elizabeth, how about you? I know that you were just wrapping some of that up, and the analogy was on point. Your top 3 takeaways in this report.
Yeah, actually, sort of circling back to that too, before I was cautiously optimistic about the potential for a soft landing, and this makes me a little bit nervous. It gives the Fed more ammunition to keep pressing harder for longer and potentially to overstep, since we haven't seen a lot of the impact of Fed policy yet. So, I'm a little bit concerned going into the new year. How is the labor market going to react? We haven't seen much reaction lately. And so when is that shoe going to drop? So I'm a little hesitant, I'm hoping for the best. And I think that's all we can do right now, and just be thankful for what we've seen in the job market. People have jobs. It's the holiday season. And I think that's the best scenario we can be in right now.
Great. Rusha, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us this morning and having this conversation. It is an interesting season dynamics within the labor market right now. We will see how it plays off as we go into the new year. For more information on this report or any of our data, please visit lightcast.io. Have a great day, and thank you for watching.